This is Tech Talk Detroit with Brian Spurgeon and Chuck Lobert. Tech Talk Detroit brings you the latest in tech news and Detroit happenings every week.
Welcome to episode 2 of Tech Talk Detroit. I'm Chuck Lobert here with Brian Spurgeon, and as hopefully you learned from our first episode, the format of our podcast, we're going to talk about some technical stuff, some things, technology and business and so on, and then we'll talk a little bit about just some Detroit happenings, sports, stuff like that. So our technical topic for today, we're going to talk about Windows Workstation, Windows 7. We're going to talk about Server 2008, the fact that it's coming end of support on January 14th. And we're going to talk about what does that mean for your company? Why should you care about it? What are your options? Different things like that. So to get us started, why don't we talk a little bit about why this matters? Why should organizations care about the fact that end of support's coming up on Server 2008 and Windows 7?
Yeah, so I think it boils down to two main points. The first being that they will no longer be pushing Windows updates. So that includes all of the optional patches, but more importantly, the security updates. So as we know, everything with security is and should be the foremost focus of a company. So when you're running this legacy software now, every week that goes by, you're putting yourself at more risk because Windows is no longer patching those exploits that we all know get taken advantage of. The other piece of that is you're also forfeiting your right to call Microsoft for next level support. So if you have a Server 2008 in your environment and it crashes and you have to go and leverage the next level support and get Microsoft involved to help you, you will no longer be able to do that without spending a significant piece of money for each support quest you have to make.
Yeah. And even, it even gets to a point where there's not even the option to even spend the extra money for it. It's just simply not available. And even as partners with Microsoft, we don't even have any kind of special support line or back-end support or anything like that we can go to help us out either. So we're kind of in the same boat. If we have any clients that still have Windows 7, that still have Server 2008, and some big issue comes up, we're stuck too. We don't have anywhere that we can go either. So I guess that brings up the question then, a lot of times what we hear when we're talking to people about this is, but wait a minute, I still need Windows 7. I still need Windows Server 2008 because I have this line of business application or this other piece of software, and the manufacturer of the software, the people that support it, whatever it is, are telling me that it's not supported on Windows 10 or it's not supported on Server 2008. So that's, we're kind of hearing a bit of that. And, my biggest concern is, what kind of software manufacturer are we dealing with if they're not able to keep up with the times? And this isn't like it's something that just dropped yesterday. We've known for a while about Windows 10. We've known for a while about the fact that we were coming up on this end of life. So, that would call into question that software manufacturer.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think if you're going to do business in the technology realm, it's your responsibility to make sure that you're doing everything you can to keep up with technology. Everybody knows it's a fast-changing environment, and I think if you're going to be in the business of it, it's your obligation to keep up with that. So I think that's the first question: is this vendor, is this partner really somebody that you should be in business with? Because Windows 10 has been out since 2015. Server 2012 has been out since September of 2012. So you're talking about a company that's now going on almost 8 years of the next version of Server OS being out, and they have done nothing to get their software ready to even make the move to 2012. Not to mention that we're now on Server 2019. So there's been 3 revisions since Server 2008. So in my opinion, if you're being held back by your vendor because of their inability to move forward, then it is absolutely time to make a change one way or another. And I think nowadays there's so much competition in the market that you should very easily be able to go out and find something that not only is comparable, but should be absolutely leaps and bounds better in terms of feature set and what you guys can leverage from it. If they haven't developed their software in this amount of time, what are you missing out on, right? So I think that's a huge point there.
Yeah, and I know that's also why we always advocate to make sure you've got current support agreements in place for those major software packages. Because what happens other times is somebody will put in a big piece of software, they'll make a big investment, and then they don't want to pay that ongoing support contract fee, so they let that lapse. And the software manufacturer may be up to date, but the version that you're on may not support Windows 10 or Server 2008. So it's very important to make sure that you're using a mainstream software package, because the other spot where we sometimes see this stuff is if somebody has something custom built by their friend, the guy that they know that knows a lot about IT type of thing. But if you have a mainstream software package, you got to also make sure that you're staying up to date with those updates, that you're paying that ongoing support contract to get access to all that stuff as well.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. And the other piece too, though, is, I know obviously we're a few days out from the January 14th deadline, and it seems like, wow, it came out of nowhere. But the reality is, we've obviously known this was going to be the case for a while. And your company's technical support, whether it's an internal staff or an outsourced company, really they should have been advising you at this point that this is approaching. You shouldn't be reacting this late into the game.
Yeah, I feel bad if you're listening to this podcast and going, wait a minute, what?
Absolutely, yeah. And if that's the case, that's there is still options to get you by. So I think that might be a good point to talk about is you're kind of faced with a dilemma now of, okay, I have Windows 7 PCs, but I don't necessarily have the budget plans to just go out and repurchase the whole new company hardware. So from that standpoint, then you're talking about a couple scenarios here. Can my PCs be upgraded to Windows 10? And I think that's a good starting point. So that's going to be, if you have hardware that can support that operating system, that's a good way to get past this issue of not getting patches without having to go and purchase all new hardware. So I think when you're talking about that, typically we would recommend anything that's inside of 3 years from a hardware standpoint should be able to handle Windows 10. But I think when you're getting outside of the 3 years, especially anything at the 5-year mark and older, I don't know that we would recommend doing that upgrade.
Right, because you want to make sure that the hardware was built for Windows 10. So what you'll run into a lot of times is if you bought your computer a few years ago, it was built for Windows 10, but there was still an option to get it with Windows 7. So, a lot of companies out there bought it with Windows 7 because that's what they were used to. That's what their software was supported on. But if that computer was built for Windows 10, it certainly can go to Windows 10 and you're not going to have any issues. So, then you've got either the capital outlay of purchasing Windows 10 because it's not free anymore. There was a period of time where it was, but that's been long gone. Or there's options, if you're already on Office 365, especially to migrate to a different licensing platform, Microsoft 365, which now gives you access to Windows 10 licensing as well.
Absolutely. I think that's key. And, you mentioned one thing in there, too, I'd like to hit on is, in the past, there's always been a hesitancy to jump on board with the newest Windows release because it's the training curve, right? Everybody knows that in the past, anytime a new Windows operating system came out, it was like trying to learn to ride a bike again, right? So I think that's certainly been the past, and that trickles back with Office as well. If you were on Office 2003, going to 2007 was a jump. 2007 to 2010 was significant. 2010 to 2013, much the same. But there has not been much of a change from 2013 to 16 and 2016 to 19. And most of you, if you're on Office 365, you probably got updated to Office 2019 and didn't even know it.
Right.
So I think Microsoft has done a good job recently of kind of trying to learn from that in the past and move away from that. So with Windows 10, they've made a firm stance that that's going to be the last major framework release that they're going to do. So future revisions are just going to be that. They're just going to build upon Windows 10 and change things about it, add features to it. So I think that's kind of a thing of the past. Also, I find that a lot of our users that we support, generally speaking, we're much more technology savvy as a whole than we were 10, 15 years ago because it is so interlaced with every business now. So I think, those are kind of concerns of the past, and you should really just embrace this move and know that moving forward, you're going to be much more efficient because you're not going to have to make those huge hurdles year to year.
Yeah, and I think it's not as big of a change as we might think it is either. I think, it's definitely different, but I think once you're used to it, at least most of the people I've talked to, they like it better. It is a good operating system, and we're focusing right now. We're talking a lot about Windows 10, about the end user side of things, because frankly, that's the easier thing to fix. But we also have the server side of things to worry about too. If you're still on Server 2008, it's a little bit more work on that side of things than it is just to upgrade to Windows 10 or put in a new PC, putting in a new server, or changing the operating system on the server. That's a bit more work. So in those scenarios, at this point, if it's not done, we're probably talking about something like, purchasing extended support in order to buy yourself a little bit of time. It's certainly not optimal, but if you're at this point a couple days away from that January 14th deadline, and you're still sitting there with Server 2008, you're kind of out of options at this point. It's probably buy that extended support and then do it as quickly as you can. Get, whether it's new server infrastructure or just upgrading the operating systems, whatever it is, getting to the later versions.
Yeah, I completely agree. And ultimately, what you're kind of faced with is invest money into a Band-Aid.
Yep.
To keep you secure and at least buy you time to make a proper transition, or really roll the dice. And I don't think, and there's not a single scenario where I would ever recommend putting your business at risk by rolling the dice.
Right. And that's where, we can kind of talk a little bit about the overall security impact that this has, because as you mentioned, you're going to lose out on those security updates. And the purpose of those security updates is, you've got your bad guys out here that are constantly looking for holes in the different software packages out there, the different operating systems out there. And then when they find them, they exploit them. And then a security patch is written that kind of covers up that hole, right? So every week that goes by and there's not a security update, that's exploits that have been found that aren't being patched. So the more time that goes, the more insecure your entire environment becomes.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's, the most of the exploits are aimed to target your end users. So when your whole workforce is using that legacy software, Windows 7, really every hour that goes by, there's a strong chance that somebody is going to take advantage of one of those users, and it's going to impact everything. So I think this is really a critical situation you're in, and you have to put some kind of effort into getting that rectified.
And that's not to even mention if we're under any kind of compliance requirements, PCI compliance, HIPAA compliance, different things like that that require you to make sure that you've got all these security holes taken care of as well. So that adds another layer too. Now, if you are under those compliance, you're going to have a tough time if you get audited and you still are sitting there with a end of life operating system and software packages out there.
Absolutely. So just to kind of sum up here, we're looking at January 14th as the deadline, Windows 7 and Server 2008 end of life support. Hopefully everybody here this is not something that's new, and this is not the first time you're hearing it. But if it is, just know there is an option to go out and get the extended support in place. Absolutely do that at first and foremost, and then quickly figure out what is your plan to move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, we can kind of transition a little bit and talk a little bit about Detroit sports. NFL season is done, at least for those in Detroit, and the hockey season is still going. Basketball season is still going. We got some games coming up this next week. The Wings actually were able to win a game last Tuesday against the Canadians. I don't know if you got a chance to see it at all, but it was a pretty good game, 4-3 win. And it's nice to see that there are at least a little bit, some bright spots that we're seeing. Obviously it's a young team, but I'll tell you, I don't know if you saw Zadina's goal for the game winner, but it was like a sniper shot just to the top right corners. It was really an amazing goal. It's good to see that young talent that are going to be the up-and-comers that are going to kind of take over and lead this team to somewhere, hopefully.
Yeah, and I think with Zadina, to start the season, I think people, when we drafted him high, people thought that he would have came along a lot quicker, myself included. So I think there was a little bit of doubt starting this year. Well, like, is he even going to be part of the picture, right? And now, he's here for good. There's no going back and forth to the Griffins anymore, and I think it's nice to see that this team does have some younger guys that really you can build around and move forward. And I think on that note too, you're kind of starting to see a similar scenario play out with the Pistons. So, they have not been good this year. They've had some injuries. They've had salary problems forever. But last week it was announced that Blake Griffin just had surgery on his knee. So you can assume he's done for the year. The trade rumors are out now on Andre Drummond. So it's clear that the Pistons are in full tank mode, which they should be, that makes me happy, right? There's not much we can hang our hats on here when we're talking about rookie players that are scoring some goals and basketball teams that are tanking, but that's where we're at. And again, you got their young guy Sekou Doumbouya that's out here starting the last 4 or 5 games, playing guarding some of the best talent in the league, and it's been exciting to watch him play. So I think both of those teams, you finally feel like maybe we're starting to build in the right direction.
And then there's the Lions.
Yeah, then there's the Lions. The best time of the year is when we start the conversations of draft talks, because that seems to be the only thing that you can get excited about, right? So we managed to successfully secure the 3rd overall pick.
So what are you doing with that pick? If you're making that decision, what are you doing with it?
I think it's a great question. I've been arguing with friends and my brother for the last week or two on that, and I think there's a significant amount of people that really believe that we should go out and take the quarterback from Alabama, Tua, with the 3rd overall pick and move on from Stafford. And, the reality is I just don't think they're going to do that. Whether that's the right move or not, you have a GM and a coach on the hot seat. And I don't know that if I'm in that position that I could go and make a pick for the future, knowing that I might not be a part of it if I make that pick. So I'll be curious to see what they do. I think at 3rd overall, there's just a couple options there that are you can't miss on, even if you are the Lions. I think it's extremely hard to draft poorly in this draft. So I'm all about taking a player that helps today, just because I think the complications of moving on from Stafford are going to be something that we wouldn't be able to overcome.
And I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I'm a football aficionado, but I enjoy it. I watch it. I follow it. I don't personally know that that's the right move. I mean, Stafford's had his ups and downs for sure, but he's not a bad quarterback. We've had, if you look at the time where, just in recent years where it hasn't made any difference with the record or the amount of wins or anything like that, we've had a good quarterback. We've had good wide receivers. It's just not, it's not a one position thing. I don't think, it's the one thing that we really haven't had is a really good running back, since the Barry days. But, to me, I think you got to go into this and just look at it like we're just going to take the best player that's available at that 3rd pick, kind of regardless to a point of what position it is, because we really need just about everything.
Yeah, we can't be picky. I mean, you can go up and down that team and find a justification for just about anybody. And the nice part at 3rd overall is outside of quarterback, you can almost get the best player at any position. So,
yeah. So looking at the upcoming week here, I know that on, I believe, Monday night, I think there is a Pistons game. I believe it's in town here. I know there's a couple of Red Wings games next week as well. They play tonight, I believe, which today is Friday, January 10th. They play tonight. They play, it looks like, Sunday on the 12th, and then Tuesday on the 14th as well. So, a couple of games that we can kind of pay attention to. If for the home games, if we can get out to Little Caesars Arena, that's always a good time. Looks like they are home on Sunday against the Sabres at 5:00, so this should be a decent game. It's always a good time to get out to the arena too.
Absolutely, yeah, and like we said, you're going to get an opportunity to see, the potential guys that are going to be the pillars of this team when we do get back into championship contending. So
yeah, and I think I mentioned this last week, but when I went to a game last year, like I kind of left completely just feeling dejected because they just looked so bad. And I've gone now to 2 games this year, and they at least look like you can see the bright spots. You can see where they're getting better. You can see that there's potentially a future there that we're going to get back to kind of where we used to be at least. So that's good to see. So. We are coming up. We've got the playoffs in the NFL. Obviously, Detroit's not in them, but what are your predictions for this week? We've got Vikings, 49ers. Who do you think wins that game?
Vikings 49ers. I think Kirk Cousins just came off of a big primetime, really his signature win. But I don't think they do it twice. Yeah. I think 49ers walk away with it.
Yeah, I do. I agree with you on that one. I think the 49ers have been looking good. What about Titans and Ravens?
I really think this one's probably the matchup of the week. You got two unbelievable offenses, two of the best running attacks in the league. I've gone against Tennessee the whole time here, almost the whole season, and they've proven me wrong. So I think this week I got to take Titans in that running game.
Yeah, I was going to go underdog, but just to be different than you, I'm going to go ahead and go with the Ravens.
All right.
We'll see. We'll see at our next podcast who won that one. So Chiefs and Texans. What do you think?
Chiefs and Texans. I got to go with the Chiefs on this. I think Texans are playing good ball right now, especially getting J.J. Watt back last week, coming off that injury. He looked way better than I thought he would have ever. I feel like I'm probably going to get burned on this one, but I think I'm going to take the Chiefs.
Yeah. I think it's going to be a good game, but I feel like the Chiefs are going to pull it out as well. And the last game is going to be the Seahawks and the Packers. I'm going Packers. What about you?
Seahawks all the way. All Absolutely. Right. I think Russell Wilson is probably the best quarterback right now overall in the NFL, and I think Aaron Rodgers did not look good. Now, the caveat here, though, is they're talking about 10 inches of snow in this game. So
yeah, it's in Green Bay. So.
Yeah, it totally all the signs align with the Packers there, but they haven't been able to get it done against Seahawks in the past, and I think Seahawks keep that magic going. So really, we got two games here we're at ends on. I think we should put a little bottle bet up on here, and whoever comes out ahead maybe owes the other guy a bottle.
I think it'll just be bragging rights.
All right, that works for me.
But so I was going to be really surprised if we agreed on more than two games, anyways. So you at least kept the 50% agreement there, so that's good.
Interact with Tech Talk Detroit at techtalkdetroit.com or on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.